And while you were speaking, I was actually, and earlier also when you touched on some of the can I say owned media platforms that these organizations have, right? When I say owned media, I mean their social media and their websites, right? Those platforms. I remember examining a master's dissertation once that very interestingly spoke about, and said in this case now, spoke about Black Twitter as, this online digital public sphere that could potentially be a space for openly speaking truth to power, whatever that means, right? In different contexts. And in this dissertation, the author tried to show in what ways Black Twitter could speak truth to power and also go against some of these Western-centric controls behind the platforms. But platforms also are value-laden, right? The platform themselves, Twitter itself or X itself is a value-laden platform that is controlled in particular ways. So you can't use particular words, you can't say particular things. So the dissertation showed particular ways in which South Africans try going against or going around these kinds of metrics of control by the West, right? Through things like very creative language code switching, very creative making up of South Africanized terms and languages that we as quote unquote Black Twitter would understand and not get banned from the platform and stuff. Are there those kinds of opportunities where Abahlali and Dudula could use social media in these smart, creative ways to get to speak truth to power without being banned from these platforms? Or because the power that they are targeting is South African based and just doesn't care about them in any case. So even if the word reaches them, nothing is still going to happen.
It's interesting. It should be like that, but the thing is, now Twitter can translate, Facebook can translate, because you can have your own Smaranya sphere where you sit down and just talk with Vedek, right? But the fact that one can translate and report you, then it blocks you from having conversations outside that. And it's maybe we need to speak about the need for I don't want to say ethnic media, because when you say ethnic, it sounds wrong. It's got wrong connotations. I don't know what we can call that, but I think how we go about with community media, and I think that's why your Isoleza in the KZN area, it's doing very well, because people believe that they can have a media platform that writes in their own language, that even the way in which it expresses the way the people feel, it does so in the language in which they speak. Because mainstream media often doesn't take such voices. It doesn't take certain languages. In the way in which, like when you see on the news, when somebody interviewing someone speaking Zulu or Tsonga, you'll have a translator, or you'll have someone even in the media house, even toning down the frustrations if they are, like trying to put it in a way in which that can be acceptable. But I think people use language because because language is power, right? The reason why in 1976 students wanted not to study in Afrikaans, because they understood that language can be used to maintain hegemony, and language can also be used to dismantle that. So like I'm saying, maybe these local languages don't find expression in mainstream media because mainstream media doesn't take local languages. It translates them when it does, and like I'm saying, when then that is translated, the language tones down. What you want to express now doesn't work. But like I'm saying, in the spaces such as Twitter and Facebook, you fall short of doing that, because when you try and do that, one can just report your post and it's removed. Sometimes you're raising an issue which is quite important, but how do you raise that issue in a way in which you believe that it could actually give out what you actually feel at the moment, without fearing that you could be muted from this space? So yes, these spaces are owned by people, and these people choose what to do with these spaces. They ban some, they remove some, they monitor some, and when they monitor some, I don't know what they do with those Twitter accounts, whether they block them or they regard them as a threat. And when they do that, people now end up going out to create their own media spaces. And I'm saying if it's on Twitter, which is a business environment, if it's on Facebook, which is also that, I think we could be failing to do that. I just don't know how we can create just our own outside these ones that are owned by big conglomerates. Prof. Yeah, it's a cause for serious concern. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess also a question and a point of inquiry for future researchers. But yeah, it is a bit upsetting, and demoralizing. But yeah, we hope for, I don't know, a better future decades from now, or something in that regard. I want us to come a bit to again your personal experience in terms of methodology, right? You've used this triangulated qualitative approach.
Yeah.
If you just speak us through that, it was a two-pronged approach, right? With the qualitative content analysis and of course the in-depth interviews. If you could walk us through maybe some of the challenges that you faced with that, but what worked for you, what did you find out wasn't working very well, and how did you remedy those, if at all?
So I use, like you say, qualitative triangulation. So I had the qualitative interviews speaking to the movement's leaders, and I also had the content analysis, still qualitative, to check the way in which the media represent the movements. I use the two, Prof, because I don't want to go with one and say this is the gospel truth. I want to go with the other as the gospel truth. I don't want to go with the media which says these are violent movements and not get the voice of the movements to say why do they say we are violent. I didn't want to go with the movement which says these media houses are this and that to us, without actually getting to understand why the media houses are being dead to them. So I had News 24, business, News 24, Times Live, the South African, and two other AWN and another media house. So I through quite a lot of articles on the movements, using obviously the line Abahlali Besemjondolo, Operation Dudula, Abahlali Housing, Abahlali Sharks, Abahlali Protest, Operation Dudula, Foreign National, Operation Dudula, this and that. It's just a lot of articles about the two, and then I skimmed them down. But like I said, like what I found with the interviews of them with the movement is that they actually feel that their voices are being left out in these articles that are written about them, and they feel that you can't write something about us without our voice. Articles too, you could find that when you read, they will say that we try to reach out to Abahlali Operation to get to understand their view on the particular issue which they're reporting on, and some say they don't want to comment on that. And in some cases, you could read that there was just an intentional exercise to want to say these are just violent groups. Like I said, there was one article that I read about Operation Dodula. That article had a comment from the Department of Health, another comment from Doctors Without Borders, another comment from the spokesman for government. That time it was still Pumla Williams speaking for government, GCIS. So you have about those three, and you have another comment from the person that are on the ground, right? But they say Dudula is protesting outside Kalafong Hospital. How is it difficult that when you say Dudula is protesting, you can just walk into a Dudula member and say, why are you protesting? Why are you doing this and that? So I got a sense that many of these articles were done through what we call desktop journalism. That someone sees a post on Facebook that there's a protest somewhere, and they pick up a phone and say, we heard that there's a protest outside the hospital. How do you feel about this? And then they share that link with them, and they see the value. And then now they call and say, how do you feel about that? Then they say what they feel about that. But because the movement is there on the ground, you hardly could get time to talk to them, because these other three are in their offices. They are commenting from their desk. And these ones are on the ground. Maybe their phone, sometimes the network is bad. And when you have those, because you have 2 or 3 comments, then you can justify running such a story. But it compromises journalism, Prof. That, like I said, this should be a space which accommodates each and every voice, especially if it reports on a person, that you need to have all the voices that you're reporting on. When we speak about objective journalism, or at least journalism that doesn't seem to favor one side, or it's not biased. It should be able to have all the voices into that. So these are some of the issues that actually even came out in the interviews, that we are shocked that there's a story about us on Media House A, and we're not called to give a comment, which now seems to be unfair. I always give this picture of, the lobola that is done in communities, that the elders will go into a house and community and discuss about someone's value, and that person is outside and is just busy preparing food for them. And one is saying, no, she's 65,000. The one is saying, no, it's 80,000, it's 90,000. But so she went to school, and she's a good girl, she's respected, but she can't even argue for a case. And at the end of the day, they call in and say, no, these people came to pay lobola for you, and they gave us 60,000. Like, I'm big salt. So that's how I could read the concerns that came out from the movement members, that you can't really talk about us without our voice. You're actually leaving us out of that. And like I was saying, having the two methods, Prof, was quite helpful for me to actually even avoid findings that could have loopholes, findings that could somehow, align to a certain narrative without actually having them critiqued. And even the way in which I present the stories of the movements, I don't present them as if they are these holy people. I even go as far as saying Dudula is very violent. Dudula has been quite divisive to South Africans. Dudula has been sending very painful messages that turns a brother against a brother, that turns an African against an African. A narrative that says our problems are caused by our other brothers from other countries, whether they came here in the country with papers or without papers. It really can't be. I think SA has an unemployment issue. It's got a crime issue. And this thing transcends a lot of years before anything that we could argue, So even the narrative that our problems are caused by foreign nationals, it's just hogwash. I think they need to be critiqued. And when you meet this, you've got to make a sense to them that this can't be the truth. And even the way in which you want to analyze what the problem is in SA, we should just go beyond that. We should go beyond that. We should use numbers. In higher education, there's these talks that foreign nationals are taking jobs, and research shows that the foreign nationals that we have in the employ of universities in SA are just about 7% or less. So you can't say they're taking our jobs. You can't say someone is taking a job that you qualify for. There's no such a thing. So these are some of the narrative that comes out. But I have a way in which I critique them, not just present them as gospel truth. And I think that's why I use a theory such as the relative deprivation, that when someone feels that they're deprived, they can do anything, even the most wrong thing, to actually argue their case. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. It's so layered, and I have just read portions of the thesis, so now I'm just like, I must probably not read the whole thing.
Yeah, there's just a lot. Yeah.
I'll probably wait for you to have shorter journal articles.
So, talking about general articles, can we go to that?
Yes. If there's more, if there's work coming out of it, please let's touch on that, and then I'll speak a little bit on the other issue I wanted to talk about. But yeah, go ahead. Let us know about.
I've sampled one or two submitted on journals, but like I'm saying, given the controversy that Dudula has, even the feedback that I'm getting on Dudula being part of the study, it's quite negative. But I'm thinking to myself, we cannot bury this thing far, because it's part of what we talk about day to day. And then we think we need to find a way to decode what Dudula is, what Abahlali is. We need to decode what causes violence. Not that we're saying such a movement deserves attention. We're not saying that, but I'm saying they deserve a voice. We need to listen to why they are doing things the way they are doing. And if there's a way in which scholarship can try and align the way in which they think, the way in which they understand these things, what we do as researchers should be able to do that. I would love to put up a book on social movements. I think there's been a lot of work done by colleagues, likes of Prof. Mpofu, Dr. Matsilele, Dr. Msimang, and many others. Dr. Masombuka at Unisa, she also I think a PhD also looks at this movement, the way in which they communicate. So there's just a lot of work that I think should come out of this. Because if you look, our politics are getting reshaped. And when you look at the way in which you would have your GNU in government, it shows just how much politics are changing, you know. Even politics have even moved to the courts, you know, many of the things that are thought to be political are being decided in the constitutional court, you know. So this is just how much I think such conversations matter, and I want to push that.
Yeah, no, and I do hope that you continue pushing. You did actually express your frustration with sometimes when you are met from particular journals with interesting pushback. Because
can I also tell you what I
to do as well
that I came up with? Is that at the end of your PhD, you almost become a pharmacist, because you know which tablets are good for your mild headache. You know that if you want to sleep,
we will not be doing marketing of brands unless it's very important.
I won't mention their names, but you know which tablets can work for you when you want to sleep for 2 hours and have to wake up and work. You know that if I have, you know that this level of headache is it's caused by stress from my studies. You know that this kind of headache just need to sleep for an hour or two and wake up, and so I think it's a journey which shapes perseverance of all things. And I think people are judged by the fact that they saw it through to the end of it. Of all things, it's just a mind game, you know. It's just a space which teaches you to not just give up, because at the end of the day, you must just finish what you started. Yeah,
it's important to finish what you started, because you do come out on the other side, right? Quite a different person, because you've learned so much about yourself in relation to others in this case also being your supervisor and your supervisory relationship, but also just other PhD scholars that were sort of in a similar journey with you on the way. And we know, unfortunately, some do fall by the wayside. Not all of us who start the journey finish the journey, unfortunately. It's quite sad that it's only it's a very small percentage of people that do finish the PhD. Not trying to scare current PhD students, please. Determination and just, you know, hanging in there will really help you. And sometimes don't imprison yourself with the stress of the timing.
For sure.
But all of us will finish the PhD in 3 years. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter.
So exactly, don't be imprisoned by discourses around, oh, you're taking more than 3 years. That's all hogwash, actually. You do it in the time frame that you can do it, in terms of how the world actually also responds to you. Because methodologically, you might have issues with interviews and stuff. There might be ethical concerns that might delay you, so don't imprison yourself. But there is the unfortunate truth that not everyone who starts the journey finishes the journey. But I even think the ones that do fall by the wayside do leave the race with so much self-knowledge, right? Interesting lessons learned, and they could apply those lessons maybe in other contexts until someday when they are ready again to come back. I just want to briefly also touch on, because you had an interesting portion to your PhD that we know as the Viva. For me, it used to be this Western-centric thing where like, we don't do Vivas here in South Africa, right? But it's been introduced. So you had the experience of having to do the Viva. You could briefly speak us through, personally, what was that like? And during the Viva, how did you manage to sort of just survive the process, and what advice would you give?
I always joke that it's like you're taking shots from 3 boxers and you're alone in the ring. And your supervisor is just there on the corner, but they're looking on the other side because they can't do anything, right? 3 professors. I think I had 2 locals and 1 international. And one good thing about a PhD is that you come out realizing how less you knew before doing that. Because remember, whether I'm writing this in essay, it should have a bit of an international perspective. Someone in the US should be able to read this and say, well, if it's a study about social movements, I can connect this to the civil rights movements in the 1960s, your Martin Luther King, your Malcolm X and stuff. Someone in wherever could think about the Maji insurgents and everything. Someone somewhere in Africa could think about the Mau Mau insurgents. Someone in Zim could think about this flag, you know. So that's just how much the study gets so multifaceted. And the fact that it just exposes you to just a lot of scholarship. And yes, you position yourself as a researcher from an African or from an Afrocentric perspective, but you also want to tease on just how much this whole concepts are understood outside the bounds of SA. So now when you sit there in the Viva, you get a question about why such a methodology instead of the other, and where could you have arrived had you used this one instead of the other. One could say there's a repetition of this word. I was looking at framing, right? But there was just one word that came out, representation, in my writing. And it means something else. And I think it reminds you that one word could change a lot about something. Just a mention of a concept can change the outlook of what you're trying to do. So there was just a lot of a word that I used, like I'm saying, representation. And one professor said, this seems to come quite a lot in the way in which you're writing. By the way, they say when I take the word and punch in there, it comes in a lot of sections. I said, are you looking at the representation? And I said, no, I'm looking at framing. But when you look at the two, these are two different concepts, which are much more also important in their own space. So I think the Viva, it teaches you to, it's almost like, you know, just, you know, that moment when you watch, there's a saying in Tsonga, before you are showing or before the auction. You know that moment where you feed the pig before you take it to auction. So Viva feels like that. Like that's almost like the last part where you just clean up and separate the chaff from the wheat just before this thing goes out, because it's going to be consumed by a lot of people. But also Viva, for me, it taught me and exposed me to the other facets that I can pull from my thesis, what I can publish from that. Yes, it feels very violent sometimes that you come out of that room and say to yourself, I could have said this to this one, but I had to hold myself because somehow
I want this degree.
exactly, I want this thing, you know. So just beyond that, there's a lesson that, you know, there's a way in which you could have done the study from other perspective. But also, what then do you do after that? You've got to write papers, prof. And I think Viva is just one space that allows you to see what you can pull from your thesis. But also, imagine having to defend your thesis or tell people what your thesis is about in 30 minutes. This is something that you write in over 100 pages. Is it possible to do that? It's almost impossible, but you've got to be able to pick from there, you know, few little from there, little from the other side, and put it together and have it make sense to someone who hasn't read this thing. The first time I met my supervisor, I remember I went there with my papers before we went with the work. So he says to me, what do you want to do? So normal, like just a newly graduated master's, like I gave him some papers, like for me to read for him and for him to, he says, no, put these things aside. Tell me what you want to do. And that day we came up with something so beautiful, which I had never conceptualized in my mind. But it's just that back and forth, a conversation with your supervisor, people who are reading on the space, that really sparks something that you want to wake up midnight and say, I have an idea. Let me write it down before I forget, because tomorrow I could think about it differently. So it's those little things that actually makes up the bigger part of what you know. But you come out very humble at the end of that. Like I'm saying, you just reminded how less you know, but how much you aspire to know as a scholar.
Yeah. And thank you about that, because maybe we sometimes overestimate the PhD when we do know it's supposed to be there's this other professor from Australia, she calls it the SOC, Professor Tara Brabazon, the SOC, significant original contribution to knowledge, right? The SOC. So when you hear about, oh my God, you need to have a SOC, right? A PhD is about having the SOC. It must be a significant and original contribution to knowledge. Then we overestimate what this could be, whereas it could be significant, but actually relatively small.
Yes.
This contribution that one makes.
and it exempts you to just think about this thing only during the process, because
Yeah.
almost like you are locked into a space which says, yes, there are other things happening outside me, but if they don't really connect to this, they don't really matter now, because if I focus on those, they like to take me out of what I'm trying to focus, because you're trying to come up with something which is so noble and straight to it, punchy, and quite focused in what you wanted to understand. Of all things, like I said, you just learn to understand that you just know little, and what you actually know is in what you research on. And when someone jokes and says, "So you don't know about this," I always say, "You know what? I think I only research on this." I've gotten interviews on mainstream media, even before this, after my master's and now. Often when I'm called to come and talk about politics, I say I'm not a political scientist. What I studied has an element of politics, you know. I think politics covers everything, but when it comes to party politics and elections and stuff, I always say that's not my space. There's public administration. It concerns what people are concerned about, the provision of services. That's not my space. As it relates to how these issues manifest in the media, you know, how they should be communicated, then I can speak about that. What I'm trying to say, Prof, is that we don't know everything, and I don't think we should think that we know everything. We know in our subject, we're exposed to that, and it sharpens that which we thought we know, you know. Yeah.
No, that's very true. I'm going to round us off in the conversation with just if you have additional, you know, now that you're here, if I were to ask you, okay, if I knew then what I know now, or if you knew then what you know now, were there things that you're going to do differently? Or do you think like you were rolling smoothly and you did everything the way that you couldn't have done it differently. You did it like you did it, even if you know now what you didn't know then.
Yeah. It's a very good question. I would have never thought time matters. I would have never thought that it matters that I finish this thing in 4 years. I would have never said to myself, I need to do this as soon as I can. I would have never thought that I need to submit this in Jan so that I don't register again the following year. I would have said to myself that it matters not when I finish this, as long as I complete this, because it's just about the fact that you have set a goal to yourself and you want to complete that. I think I've done justice to myself also as a scholar, you know. I think I came out wiser, but I think I came out quite humble. The process that, like I said, you thought you know much, but you know quite less, and that one issue could be multidimensional, could be understood from different perspectives. That one issue doesn't always have a yes or no answer. That sometimes you don't need to answer, you don't have to find answers for something. That is fine if something keeps on intriguing you, that you still want to understand what you want to understand about such a phenomenon. And I think that's what I'm trying to do. I still want to understand, why do people decide not to go vote, you know? Why do people decide to ban libraries? I listen to them and I still don't really get the sense of that. Someone have a different answer to that. But I think scholarship should be able to tell us that we're in this is an over-ending road. It's just winding. We're trying to understand something, and that something could be understood from different perspective. And just how I understand that, Prof, could be different from how you understand that you could employ different theories or employ different theories. Where I come from, I have a fair different understanding of something because of my background. That I think democracy really doesn't exist, because where I come from, there's no water, you know, there are no roads. I was stuck in Limpopo for the whole month in Jan because there was just flood. I had to park my car for the whole week and I had to walk. But I keep on voting. I pay tax for that. And I want to understand why my grandfather still vote for the ANC, you know, those kind of things. I want to understand why they're not frustrated. Why do people think a social grant is just enough for them to keep on voting for a political party? And why do others think that it's not enough? I want to understand that why do myself, I pay tax, but when I take my son to school, I can't access NSFAS because SARS says I can afford to do that, but I can't afford. I want to understand that why do SARS keep on going after me even when I'm paying so much from SARS? That I would want to believe that
Sure.
if I pay so much, they would say, let's keep this is trying. That
Yeah.
even in you trying to give, why do the government just keeps on taking from you? You know, these are things that should keep us asleep at night. That why do a minister says some people, prefer sleeping on the floor when they're in hospital? Why do a premier says he has to go and bath in a hotel as if you just knock and say, I'm coming to take a shower, because you have to pay for that. I want to understand how, you know, the social dynamics in SA are shaping us. And I think all of these things are scary because they remind us of this ticking time bomb that one day or one point, some could wake up at night and say, we're going to storm the government complex, we're angry at this and that. And I think our politicians are sleeping because they don't realize that there's a conversation that's happening outside the corridors of power, that people are frustrated. And sometimes they just have very evil thoughts about how they should take this government back to them, you know. So these are things that really wants me to understand. But the space in which we're at, it doesn't allow us to just want to understand all these things without the theoretical underpinnings, you know, the structure that the research has to have. It limits us from understanding these things. But these are things that we need to talk about, and maybe outside scholarship, we need to gather and have our own little gatherings and say, how do you feel about this? How can we elevate your voice to government as scholars? We do interviews, we research, we interview you, and we say, this is what people want to hear from you as government or as politicians, because at some point something will give in, and it should done so out of an agreement, not that one should wake up and one night and just ambush the other and say, this belongs to me, I want this. I write about the movement's members, that many of these people are found in townships. They are found in far-flung areas in the northwest, in Mpumalanga. There are mining companies that are mining from there. They're extracting what they have, and when that ground is no longer fertile for them, they leave. They leave holes. They don't even care to come back and try and fix the area. And now that area becomes an attraction for crime. Now people go and mine, and when they mine, some die inside the mines. But they're trying to find something to eat. Why can't companies, you know, get themselves into some sort of a rehabilitation of the areas which they mine from? They just take and go and leave, you know, holes and water when it rains, kids go and drown there, you know, those kind of things. These are things that I think should keep us asleep, sleepless
Awake.
at night, and to keep us awake. Yeah. But many of these things, Prof, they don't really manifest in the studies that we do, you know, because these are mining studies, but I think these are studies that concerns us as human beings, you know. So I think I came out as a social, and I'll never shy away from this. I came out as a social activist, and one day I want to join an NGO. One day I want to wake up on a Saturday, and I think you and I spoke about this. I want to wake up and go work in a soup kitchen. I want to one day wake up and contribute 1,000 a month so that some people can have food. Yeah.
Oh, that is actually amazing. It's amazing that our academic pursuits then help us become these kinds of people that are for social justice, right? Because then what's the use of doing all this academic work if it's not going to bring any form of change to the world?
Sure.
So I'm really, really glad to hear you speak in this way. And I think it will motivate current PhD students as well, or postgraduate students, to see beyond getting the degree and doing the research just for the purposes of the degree, right? The bigger picture always counts. You've actually captured closure in terms of motivating current students
Yeah.
But please feel free if you want to directly motivate current postgraduate students, especially at M&D level, who feel a bit despondent right now,
Yeah.
feeling like
Yeah.
maybe this research thing is not for me. Maybe my background, because of my background, linguistically or whatever, technically, or something is just not clicking. If you could just advise here.
You know, I would say one thing, Prof. This thing is it's made for everyone. Like I said, where I come from, I would maybe the only way I could have become a doctor would have been a doctor in academia, because like my maths was quite bad, and we were judged through maths when we were younger that, you know, the level of brightness is measured through numbers and science. I sound different, you know, I sound different from any other person who went to a good school. I might not pick that up, but I'm sure when I'm on radio, when I'm on TV, or when someone listens from me says, I pick up a Limpopo accent. But I don't think that really matters, you know. What matters is what you have inside you, what you want to people to understand about you. But also beyond that, what drives you, you know. You're trying to go back home where you come from and motivate many other people of your age or younger to say this thing is possible. And yes, postgrad studies are quite challenging, but I think there's an incentive at the end of that. There are also bursaries, there are also scholarships. If your grades are good, you get a scholarship for your PhD, you get a scholarship for your master's, there's NRF. Universities has got everything to support students. The other time I was reading the VC for the Northwest University was saying we have bursaries for all M&D students, like 100%, because they're also trying to grow their school. Yeah, for sure. They're trying to grow their numbers. So there's no reason for one not going to do their postgrad studies, especially if they are in academia, you know. And I always, when I say this story to people, that I always say, if you think a diploma is enough or a degree is enough, just assume that from your area of specialization, there's maybe 5 from each university is graduating every year, and put yourself, and then you say you're applying for a job, you will be maybe over 300. And for one person to come out of that, it's a miracle. But as you go by, when you have an honors, you're cutting down the competition. When you have a master's, you're cutting down on that. But just beyond cutting the competition, you're also coming out much more learned and clear. Yeah.
Oh, no, definitely. Thank you very, very much. The way time just flies. I love how time flies when people get to speak about
almost half. Yeah.
I know, right? But I'm really excited about that, because now we'll definitely have 2 episodes coming just from this conversation. We'll have a part 1 and a part 2, so that we do know the concentration economy these days and the attention economy is a bit tricky. So we'll have a part 1 and a part 2. Then viewers can munch through them nicely in those 2 parts. But thank you very much. I really appreciate
this, Prof.
And this wasn't the last conversation. We will still have particular conversations that will sometimes be very.
Can have part 3.
Exactly. But we'll need to speak on other matters as well, as we grow in this academic journey, as you grow on your way now to, I'm not assuming, I know, on your way now to things like promotions to AP, promotions to full professors one day. Exactly. Do receive whatever book projects that you're gonna have. So as your journey now develops into towards those milestones, we'll be having conversations throughout as well. But I thank you for today's conversation, and wish you a great day further. Thank you very much. I'll let you know about future conversations. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.